Okay, so let's re- record, and we are recording. Yeah, okay. So, hello everyone. Thanks for taking the time once again to hear me speak for a couple of minutes. I imagine that's not something that uh, I don't know. At least I don't really like my voice, so it's a good thing that you guys managed to get through a whole hour of it. Uh, yeah, so I think everything's working. Um, sure. So the idea of these community webinars is that is to establish a channel of communication between myself and the team behind WP Ultimo and the people that are actually using the plugin. It's something that I feel like uh, was something that we lacked a lot in the past. So we used to do our thing here, developing the plugin, and a lot of cool discussions were happening over on Facebook that we are not being a part of. And we realized that that was a mistake. So these webinars uh, are a chance to talk a bit about what we are doing with WP Ultimo, the things we are working on, and to have a direct line of communication with our users. So if this is your first time here, I'm pretty sure there are a couple of people here that were not present during our last webinar. So welcome. Yeah. So last time, what we did is that I had a couple of announcements and things that I wanted to discuss. And then we had a Q&A session, pretty much not really a session, more like a discussion where people would pose questions and we would use the chat to talk about it. And that's pretty much what I have planned for today as well. In the future, I would hope for this to become something a bit more interactive. But I understand that now, at least for the first ones, this is the way to go. And hopefully, with more in the next webinars, people will start to feel a bit more comfortable to turn their webcams and mics on and actually uh, engage in a discussion here. Okay, so just to be sure, are you still being able to hear me? Uh, uh, I'm actually here on Facebook as well. So, hi Matthew, James, welcome. Yeah, sure, awesome. So, first announcement is something that I'm really proud of. I think it looks really good, and I would love to share with you guys. One of the problems with WP Ultimo, and actually that's true for almost every project, every product that I've put out there so far, is that I tend to create products that are hard to explain. So I still have a hard time explaining what WP Ultimo does to people that are not familiar with the website as a service model, or people that are not tech savvy at all. And this is a problem that we have because we have a lot of potential leads that, for some reason, end up on the WP Ultimo landing page, but they don't really get what the plugin does by reading the features and the tagline and stuff like that. So I think there's a huge uh, percentage of conversion being lost because we have a bunch of potential clients there. When they land on the WP Ultimo landing page, they don't really get a good grasp of what the plugin is about. So one of the things that we are trying to do, um, and in that front, I have a lot to thank Matthew Hodella, which is actually watching here as well, and Michael Short, is that we need to somehow make the whole idea of the website as a service uh, model uh, a bit more easy to digest, something that people feel like they would be able to do themselves, and of course WP Ultimo being the tool to get started. So what we did is that we commissioned a explainer video for WP Ultimo. We actually commissioned two, one for WP Admin Pages Pro as well, but that's not ready yet. But the WP Ultimo one is, and I would like to show you. And feel free to tell me what you guys think. And please let me know if you guys can hear the audio because I'm not sure if Big Marker is smart enough to route the audio out as well. So here we go. Let me know if you guys can see it.
This is Henry. Henry owns a web design agency. He's looking for an easy solution to cater customized websites towards his low-budget clients. However, Henry is having trouble with this. Lisa, on the other hand, wants to start a website as a service business, offering a subscription-based network of websites for niche-specific blogs. Henry and Lisa both decided that the best solution is to set up a WordPress multi-site. However, to set up a multi-site network, each step must be done manually. This is a lot more complicated and time-consuming than they thought. But then they discovered the WP Ultimo plugin. Now, getting their premium network up and running is as simple as finishing the steps on the WP Ultimo wizard. In less than 5 minutes, their network was set up with a multi-step sign-up flow, subscriptions panel, payment form, and different website templates. Conveniently, everything is automatically installed, including example site templates ready for them to modify. Henry now has many happy clients set up on his premium network. And Lisa has built her first niche site builder platform, which is now continually growing, saving her plenty of time and sweat. Set up your own premium subscription network. Get started with WP Ultimo today.
So yeah, that was it. Yeah, thanks, William. So we'll be putting that on the landing page soon. Uh, I still feel like the contents of the video are not 100% true because it's not as simple as it make it sound. But it's a good thing because the video almost serves like some sort of contract. Now we need to make the setup process for 2.0 as simple as possible. So the video is actually true. So, uh, but yeah, so that's the first thing. I was really surprised with the content, and I hope that the video will help people uh, understand what the problem we are trying to solve here, because there's a lot of things that do have this problem, um, and they don't know that there's a solution out there, and sometimes they do end up on our page, and they don't understand that WP Ultimo is the solution that they've been looking for all this time. And I hope that this little video helps to close this gap. So that's the first thing. I appreciate your comments. I really love the animation style, and I think it will work beautifully with the landing page that we have right now. Okay, so that's our first topic. Um, And now we have uh, news that I think are pretty good, but I'm really anxious to deliver to you, and you guys will see why shortly. Um, okay, are you still with me? Audio good, video good. Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks for clarifying that the video actually helps. Awesome. So moving on, this is something that it's quite huge as well. It's a huge decision, especially from the development standpoint. But I think it will have a lot of benefits in the long run. So here's the thing. One of the and I actually I was watching the webinar from the first webinar, and I realized that I say here's the thing all the time. I'm sorry about that. Uh, but yeah, uh, one of the reasons why the development of WP Ultimo 2.0 was taking that long is database and database structure. And here's why we were having a hard time with the database structure. So, as many of you guys know by now, WP Ultimo was born out of frustration with the solution that existed in the market at the time, which was WPMU Dev's Pro Sites, and I tried to fork Pro Sites and work with the Pro Sites code, but I realized that I actually needed to create my own thing to achieve the goals that I had in mind at that time. The thing is, by the time that I decided to start my own thing, uh, I had been working with Pro Sites for a good 3 months or so. So all of the database structure that I had uh, was based on the database structure that ProSites created for me. As a consequence, when I started to work on the WP Ultimo code, I actually took a lot of inspiration from the database structure of ProSites. And although that was a good idea at the time because it allowed me to see how they did a bunch of the more complex stuff like payment gateways and stuff like that, things that I had no idea how to implement on my own at the time. Uh, it is something that is really holding us back right now because it is a pretty set in stone database structure. It's not flexible at all. Uh, so a lot of the cool things that we want to implement for 2.0 require a lot of changes uh, to the database structure. And okay, so that's point one. Point two is that one of the major goals of 2.0 was not to break backwards compatibility. I I I did not want our customers to have to be stuck on version 1.x and have them pay a fee to upgrade and have a migrator or something like that, or just say that 1.x is over. We have this new product that is WP Ultimo 2.0. It's a completely different product. You have to set up your network all over again. That was something that I really didn't want to do. Um, and that became that I think that's the way to go. That's that it's the way to do right by the customers, and I want to do that. Uh, However, the way we chose to follow that path was the wrong way. Looking in retrospect, I can see that now. So, as an example, I'm going to share one of the files that we have on the 2.0 code. And you guys, let me see if you're able to see that. Here we go. Um, can you guys see it? It's a bunch of code. I promise you guys will understand in a second for the ones that are not developers, of course. Okay, so this is the PHP code that creates the subscriptions table for WP Ultimo 2.0. Uh, and this part here called upgrades, it's all the different changes we need to make to the current database schema. So the database that you have right now at 1.10.5. And we need to perform all of those changes. 9 database changes to get your database table from the state it is right now to the state we need it to be for 2.0 to work. Each of these migrations here, they are actually a function, a PHP function that makes the queries to change the database. So here on the first migration, I need to remove the user ID as a unique index and re-add it as a normal index. Here, adding a customer ID column to the table. Here, I'm adding a currency column to the table. Here, I'm adding the plan ID as an index, and so on and so forth. So each migration, and there are a couple of migrations that are pretty complex. So we're changing the name of some columns. Uh, and as you see here, we have a lot of code just to get the database from the state that they are at the moment to the state where we need it to be. Each of those migrations uh, is a point of failure. So if during the upgrade process, any of those migrations fail for whatever reason, uh, you end up with a database structure that is not compatible with 2.0, and that can lead to all sorts of problems. So uh, that is basically the reason why we actually decided this a couple of weeks ago, and we are already working towards that. But we are taking a different path to achieve backwards compatibility now. So instead of trying to get your network from the current state to the state we need it to be via migrations, database migrations that add a lot of points of failures, uh, which can basically destroy your network. And if you do not have a backup, for example, you might lose all the work that you've put onto your network. We decided that we are going to take a completely different approach. So what we're going to do is that we're basically going to uh, develop a completely new uh, version of WP Ultimo with a new database structure that reflects exactly what we needed to do. That gives us the flexibility that we need. Uh, and then we will work our way backwards. So after the new version is ready and we feel like uh, that's a stable version, what we'll do is that we'll work on a migrator code, which basically will basically read your database structure as it is now, make the changes to the data to fit the new model, and then migrate your databases, the custom tables that WP Ultimo has, to the new database schema. That gives us a lot of advantages. First, it is a process that it's much easier to revert if something goes wrong. So, and we are going to do that for you as well. So, even if you don't do a backup during the upgrade process, before running the upgrade, we will create a backup for you uh, of the database uh, with an option to restore everything if something goes wrong. So you don't need to worry about. And at the same time, that allows us to create the ideal database, not the best database possible uh, from migrations. And that's a huge thing because there's a lot of things that we plan to do that require database flexibility, and we don't have that at the moment. And it is pretty hard to reach that level of flexibility by making small incremental changes to the database model that we have right now. So that's the first thing. Uh, we are going, so to summarize the entire thing, rather than working with the code that we have right now and try to get that code and that database to a state where the features of WP Ultimo 2.0 are possible to implement, we're taking a different approach. So we're completely ignoring how WP Ultimo has been working so far and all its limitations. And we are going to do with 2.0 exactly what we wanted to do. So there are no limits to the database structure. We can pretty much create and add everything we want and that we think we'll need without worrying about backwards compatibility. When we get that code base to a stable version, we can walk away back and create a migrator. And all of this is going to be available to all WP license holders. So this is not going to be a paid upgrade, nothing like that. This is it's just a different way to achieve the same result, but that we as a team decided that it's probably going to yield better results. Um, so yeah, that's the huge thing that we've been working so far, uh, and the results so far are pretty good because we have a pretty modern code base right now. As I said the last webinar, I'm 24 years old now. When I started WP Ultimo, it was in 2014, so 5 years ago, when I wrote the first line of code of WP Ultimo. And that was 5 years ago, so I was 19, yeah. And the the 19 years old Arindo was not a very good programmer, and a lot of that code uh, is still in WP Ultimo to this day. And so now that I've been working with WP Ultimo for 5 years, and I've been doing a lot of work, like like client work for uh, large companies and stuff like that. I'm a much better programmer than what I was 5 years ago, and I get pretty frustrated with the code that we have, the legacy code that we have right now because of that. Because it's code that is pretty bad to refactor. It's almost impossible to refactor. Um, it doesn't really scale that well, uh, and it's basically holding everything back. So the the bad thing about this code in particular is that it's mostly on located on the most important part of the plugin, which is how WP Ultimo handles payments, uh, and how WP Ultimo handles permissions and locking sites up and stuff like that. So yeah, so rather than work with this legacy code base and try to take something that is good out of it, we're basically rewriting that part uh, from uh, from a different perspective. The good the good thing about that is that now that we have a more or less fresh starting point, uh, we can actually use best practices from the ground up. So we are implementing tests so we can make sure that we don't break things when we add another piece of code. Uh, we are adding things like code linkers to make sure that the code is using a consistent style, to make sure that developers don't forget to add documentation comments to functions and to classes and stuff like that. And all of those things are completely automated now. So even if I want to make a mistake now, it's going to be pretty hard to get that code into the master branch, because there's all of these checks that prevent me from doing that. Uh, this is actually something that Felipe, our new hire, that I also talked about uh, on the past webinar, and I think he's on the chat. So if you can say hi, Felipe, go ahead. Um, but yeah, and he's a WordPress core contributor. Uh, he's managed the Brazilian WordPress support forums. So he's actually someone that knows how to do that kind of stuff. So he's been really helpful in getting those automated processes in place to make sure that uh, the code that we are working on follow proper standards and is easy to read and to extend, which is also a good thing for developers that work with WP Ultimo. Um, and it has a lot of another advantage as well, which is right now at the team we are three full-time developers, but I do have a network of freelancers that I know that have some experience working with WP Ultimo, that I activate sometimes to help solving a particular issue or implementing a particular feature. And a problem that we had in the past working with those freelancers is that uh, they know how to work with WP Ultimo, but they don't really know how all of the code base interacts. So how a given feature interacts with another feature. So they implement something that ends up breaking something else. This is something that is not common going to work now because if we have proper testing in place, if something breaks, their uh, the code that they are submitting for review will be flagged as something that is breaking uh, the features that we have right now. So it's something that will make the process of onboarding freelancers to work on the code base much easier as well. And that's something that it's probably going to speed up the development as well. So yeah, uh, um, about Felipe, as I said, we're probably going to have a post on the Next Press website about uh, telling a bit more about him, his background, and the kind of skills that he brings to the table. Um, but yeah, and maybe I'll get him to be like to show his face on some of these webinars as well. Let's see how that goes. Um, but yeah, in terms of announcements, I think that's all that we have. Um, yeah, so William said that that sounds really great. I like the idea of using the new code base and just mapping the data to the new sprint. Yeah, yeah, that's the goal here, William. And a lot of the things that we are doing are actually informed by some of the complaints that you made in the past. Uh, so, for example, I think a lot of people know this, but the code that we use for domain mapping right now, it's not our code. So it's something called Mercator. Mercar. I don't know how to pronounce that in English. Mercar. Yeah, it's a plugin that exists. It was developed by TenUp, which is a huge WordPress agency, but it's not really being maintained anymore. And so that's something that we have to address. And we're probably going to fork that code and rewrite some portions of it as well, because there's a lot of issues that we have with the domain mapping code right now that we can't really address uh, using WP Ultimo code alone. We need to actually change the way uh, the domain mapping code works. So that's something that we are going to do as well. And we will take that opportunity to make sure that we make the entire process of mapping a new domain much easier to the end customer. And I know that that's something that a lot of people ask about. And I know that William had to develop an entire new system, make changes to the account page to make sure that his clients knew how to map a domain and that they used a CNAME record and not a record, which I now realize it's a better plan of action. Uh, and all of those things are not really on the WP Ultimo code at the moment. So yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, so that's even worse. we this is something actually that there's a guy called Paul Salloway, and he sent me a couple of proposals, uh, items for us to discuss. And one of the items that he submitted is it's actually this one. Um, uh, he was not sure how to handle domain mapping. Because of that, there's not a lot of material out there covering what are the best practices uh, when offering domain mapping. So if you offer the way WP Ultimo does it right now is that we uh, tell your end customers to add a record pointing directly to the IP address of your network. Uh, that has some advantages because a record resolves much faster than a CNAME record because you're mapping, you're pointing the domain directly to the IP address. So you're not doing an extra DNS lookup because when you use a CNAME record, the CNAME is pointing to a record, and the A record is pointing to the IP address. So when your user uses that domain, uh, the DNS has actually to resolve to the from the CNAME to the A record, and then from the A record to the actual IP address. So that was the reason why WP Ultimo actually recommends that you use your end user use the A record. But I do agree that a CNAME record actually makes much more sense because people change hosts, and when they change hosts, they're probably going to get a completely new IP address, and then all of their customers will have to change the pointing of the domain mapping. So they're going to change the A record to point to the new IP address. So this is something that William has stressed, and I completely agree with. But it's not something that we it was not something that was a use case when we implemented that feature originally. So this is something that we're going to change, of course. Um, so yeah, so Mercator is actually something that we're going to ditch. We'll keep the same database structure for that, just to make sure that we don't break any mappings. But we're going to add a couple of features, like you'll be able to add different mappings. So a lot different domains for a single site. You'd be able to select the protocols for each of the mappings. So if you want to access uh, the domain via HTTPS or HTTP, make one of those the primary domain, and stuff like that. So a lot more flexibility. Oh yeah, and here's the thing, Matthew Hodella from the Turnkey website Blueprint Facebook group. He's also working on an awesome plugin for WP Ultimo, which basically abstracts away all the DNS management part of domain mapping. So your users are basically going to point their domains to your name servers, and then all the management of those domains, you can manage all of that directly from your network admin. So I actually have that here. Let me share that with you. Okay, so you should probably be able to see that now. Uh, but yeah, domain mappings is definitely an area that we we have a lot of work to do. Uh, as soon as we get 2.0 out, we'll probably have a Cloudflare integration out as well. But I'm not sure if something like a DNS manager uh, with the complexity of what Matthew has done here is something that we are going to do ourselves, or if that's something that belongs in core. I'm not sure. So I think that his solution is probably going to be the most uh, the the more complete one if you're planning to offer something like email in the future where there's a lot of different DNS records that the user needs to create, and that increases the complexity of the setup. And having the client just point to a name server is probably the way to go in those cases. So yeah, I would recommend that you guys take a look. Uh, and I would love to hear the the suggestions that you guys have for domain mapping specifically, because this is something that I want to get right the first time, uh, and to have it as flexible as possible to allow us to continue to add cool stuff in the future. So Uh, uh, I'll probably add a couple of posts to the Facebook group after the webinar or tomorrow with these specific points so we can have a more structured discussion about those. Uh, so I can take notes and then use those notes to inform the development going forward. Yeah. Um, okay. So there are a couple of other topics that I'll create posts about as well, and I would love if you guys could uh, leave your thoughts on those features. Uh, but yeah, I think that right now we can move to the Q&A. And there's okay. Alfredo is asking how far out is 2.0 and the migrator. Uh, we are not giving that date yet. Uh, I learned my lesson, and if I'm not, if I'm going to just give a date out that I'm not 100% sure we're going to be able to actually meet, I'm not going to give a ETA. Uh, I think that this approach will save us a lot of time, though, because uh, we don't have to worry about legacy code and legacy features and how things used to work in the past. In the past, we can build the tool that we actually think it's the ideal tool based on the feedback that we've gathered for the past 3 years, and then walk away backwards uh, to offer backwards compatibility. So that's actually I know that it sounds counterintuitive when you say something like you're ditching the entire code base and starting all over again, but it's actually going to save us time. Okay, guys. So here on Big Marker, we have a Q&A tab. If you could use that instead of the chat to propose questions, that would be great. Okay, so Will the DNS improvements be integrated with Open SRS and or my WPM UDEV hosting since they're upgrading in that area too? What kind of upgrades are WPM UDEV is WPM UDEV implementing in terms of DNS? I'm not sure if I heard or saw anything on their hosting panel, but I might be wrong. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher your name. Uh, Davy? Brown? T. Yeah, here's the thing. As a no no native English speaker, uh, uh, phonetic like spelling doesn't really help in my case. I'm sorry. Okay, so you mentioned a lot of tech features issues. What business management features are being added? So there's quite a lot actually, uh, and they are more or less related with the tech part of things as well. So one of the things that we are doing is that we are basically making every pretty much every element of a subscription uh, uh, changeable, editable uh, on WP Ultimo. So if you go ahead and create a subscription on Stripe, for example, you would be able to import that subscription back to WP Ultimo. If you have a bunch of customers that are subscribers on Stripe or not, did not create an account via the WP Ultimo sign up flow, you would be able to import those customers back to your WP Ultimo as well. So we are trying to make adding customers from existing sources or existing systems as simple as possible. That's one thing. Another thing that we are going to implement is not in actually in the front end, but more or less in the back end of things. But every sign up process will create a card object, and uh, once we have that card object in place, we can do all sorts of cool stuff. So if, for example, the customer abandons the sign up process, you would be able to create a sequence of emails to try to recover that customer based on the card information that we've gathered. All of that, of course, will be integrated with our webhook system and our Zapier integration. So you'll be able to use different tools to try to recover that card. So if you have a CRM that handles that, or something like active campaign or something like that, you should be able to uh, bridge that gap and have those systems try to recover a customer that you would otherwise lose for good. Um, we are working on the Zapier actions. So right now, we only trigger events on tools like Zapier. Uh, but the idea is that you should actually be able to perform actions on WP Ultimo based on uh, external tools as well. So if you have a drip sequence on active campaign or something like that, and you want to use the information that you gather via a form or something like that on another system and use that to create a subscription or to create a trial account, you'll be able to do that. Uh, there's a bunch of cool automations that you'll be able to do. So something that I was reading about the other day, and that seems to be pretty effective, is trial extensions. So uh, you, for example, your customer is on trial, and you're sending a drip campaign, and then maybe there's a survey or something at the end of that campaign, and if your customer answers that question, you extend the trial. So that's something you would be able to do using Disappear or using the webhooks integrations. Uh, we I'm planning to do that. I'm not 100% sure if that's going to be possible, but we are doing our best to have a REST API by the time we launch. So that opens all sorts of possibilities for integration as well. And then, of course, there's the whole thing about reports and taxes, uh, which are things that we are actually uh, working on as well. So in terms of business management, we want to offer you both options. If you want to manage things using WP Ultimo, you will be more or less able to do that. But if you want to integrate WP Ultimo with all the tools that you are already using to manage your business, so CRMs and stuff like that, you'll be able to do that as well. Hope that answers the question some manner. Okay, so William is asking, I know there is an issue with subscription expiring a couple of hours before the payment is requested. Is this being fixed? Yes, we have a couple of customers that are experiencing that issue, and we're checking to see what might be the reason, because I I I was not able to replicate it locally. I suspect that it's something related with having two different time zones on your server, uh, because PHP, you are able to set a different time zone for PHP, and your database can use a different time zone. We do have some code on WP Ultimo to mitigate that problem, but in some specific configurations, when the cron the function that checks to see if there are any subscriptions going to expire soon, when that runs, uh, it, it it because of the difference in timestamps, uh, it thinks that a subscription is expired when actually it isn't yet. So yeah, now that we have a couple of people that are actually experiencing the issue, we're able to do some actual debugging to try and find what's really causing the problem. Are we using WP Chrome for that? Yeah, unfortunately, that's the only way to do it. The thing is, most managed WordPress hosting, they have real Chrome running, so it's not actually a problem, uh, because uh, there's actually a system call being sent to the Chrome endpoint of WordPress, and you don't need to make sure that your site is being accessed all the time to make sure that uh, WordPress Chrome is running. The problem when real Chrome is not being used is that often the expired notice won't go out uh, until after the subscription is actually expired, not before. Okay, let me check if we have something on Facebook. Okay, so James said that he is researching the product and it's ready to buy. He wants to build a MVP on one network, but it's not ready to buy Pro, but it's the only way to get the one premium add-on that I want, affiliate WP. Have you considered allowing individual purchase of premium add-ons? I noticed you used to sell this add-on for 8 on Gumroad. Requirement to buy into Pro has hindered me from making a buying decision. Yeah, I get that uh, it's sometimes when, especially when you only want a single add-on, that can be problematic. What we are probably going to do is to make the add-ons there are uh, integration based. We might reconsider if we're going to offer them as free add-ons or not. I'm not sure yet. This is something that we actually have to think about. But I don't see us actually changing the the pricing model, at least at the moment, because it makes our lives much easier. Because we're a small team, so I'm actually doing a lot of the business part of things, as well as development. And when we had a bunch of different add-ons for sale, we had to make sure that all the products were up to date and the latest versions were there. And it added quite a bit of overhead, and that was the primary reason why we made this change. So for at least for the near future, the that decision is not, we are not probably not going to rethink that decision. The thing is, we do offer a 30 uh, days money back guarantee. And if you're really eager about testing this particular add-on, send me an email and I'll send the add-on to you, and you can see if that's something that you that will uh, solve the problem that we you are trying to solve. Okay, so on the last webinar, you mentioned some large networks. What is considered large, and what are the issues that are encountered in a large network? So this is a pretty this is a good question. A large network, uh, it's hard to define because it depends on a lot of factors. If you are running a network that is hosting institutional sites that they're pretty much static pages, uh, and you add a good caching plugin, a large network can be, it's probably going to be something like 20,000 sites, 15,000 sites. Uh, if you are hosting a network that is offering e-commerce stores, for example, that number is going to be a lot lower. Um, so it depends on what kind of plugins you're using, how you're actually serving the sites itself. So if they're being served from cache or uh, using PHP. Um, but in terms of what problems we encounter, uh, they're mostly on there are a couple of tasks that we can only perform if we loop through all the sites or all the subscriptions or all the customers. And every time we need to do something like that, if you have a large number of sites, uh, you're probably going to run into some sort of error. So one thing that we noticed, for example, so right now on WP Ultimo, if you delete a plan, you will be asked to uh, assign all of the customers that were on that plan to a new plan. And that works right now. The way it works is that we loop through all the subscriptions and assign the new plan. That is super fast and works really, really well for a network with 100 sites or 1,000 sites. But if you have a network with 30,000 sites, that action is going to take your network down. Uh, so that's why we are actually adding a job queue. So it's a piece of software that uh, creates a queue of tasks and run those tasks in the background. So that way we can make sure that heavy duty tasks like this uh, do not affect the performance of your network and that they will not take down your network. And this is something that we were only able to realize was happening because we have a few clients with large networks, and they are started to experience those problems. Um, hey, Bon, how are you? Can you eliminate my subsites from being the Ultimo plugin? Yeah, by default, the WP Ultimo plugin shouldn't appear on the dashboard of a subsite that is under a subscription. So you need to make sure that that subsite is under a subscription. And if that's the case, WP Ultimo will hide itself from the plugins table. Okay. Okay, so I bought card flows to work with my future WAS and WP Ultimo. I see that you still need to buy WOO subscriptions and a WAS Pro plugin. Any plans for direct integration with card flows, or are there any better upsell opportunities available? Okay, so thanks for the question, Tom. Uh, yeah, so here's the thing. I talked with the founder of the company that actually develops card flows during WordCamp US, and he told me that uh, card flows they are working to decouple card flows from WooCommerce, so you would be able to create funnels without the need for WooCommerce. And that's something that it's really great because if that's the case, we can make WP Ultimo products available, and you should be able to create different funnels using those products that WP Ultimo exposes to cart flows. Uh, 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 um, I actually followed up with him last week. So what is going to happen is that uh, uh, I'll probably he'll probably put me in contact with one of their developers, and we will try to see uh, what we can um, do to make that integration smooth and take the whole WooCommerce thing out of the equation, because WooCommerce it's a huge dependency to have just to be able to offer upsells and cross sells and stuff like that. That's one thing. The other thing is that one of the things that we are planning to achieve with our new checkout flow uh, is to have native upsells and cross sells and stuff like that. Because one of the major features of 2.0 is that you will be able to offer not only plans but packages as well. So uh, you can create, for example, a bundle with 3 or 4 different plugins and offer that as a different package. So your customer would sign up for a main plane, and then uh, be offered during the checkout that package option, and and uh, attach that package to the subscription. So since we are going to offer those packages, I think it's a reasonable thing to also offer a way to cross sell those packages during the checkout. And this is something that we are planning to get done for 2.0 as well. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. Can those packages also be sold after the checkout? Yeah. Uh, so you actually have almost like a store on the back end with different packages, and you can of course make different packages available for different plans and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's the idea. Primarily, your customers would be able to purchase those packages on the account page, but I think it's a huge plus if we manage to allow you to offer those packages as cross sells during the checkout as well. It's one of the ways you have to increase the the value you get out of a customer right there up front. Mm-mm-mm. Okay, guys, I'll take another couple of questions. We are nearing, yeah, yeah, little over 1 hour now. I think that's a good time. Yeah, so will all these the sales be tied into the same Stripe PayPal account so they don't have to add all their info again? Okay, so yes and no. It actually depends on the payment gateway. This is something that we are able to do with Stripe, especially on the US. For Europe, they have this entire new regulation called SCA, which imposes a bunch of different rules on how you can charge customers cards and upgrade subscriptions and stuff like that. But with Stripe, it's much easier to do in general. I'm not sure if we are going to if we're going to offer that with PayPal. I'm pretty sure we will, based on their documentation. But this is something that we are actually doing as well. So up until this point, we had a policy of the lowest minimal denominator. So there are a lot of cool things that you are able to do with Stripe that are not available for PayPal. And since they are not available for PayPal, what we used to do is that we would not make use of those cool features, because that would mean that some features would be available for Stripe and not for PayPal. That's something that we're also changing. So if you have this payment gateway with all of those cool features like Stripe or Go Cardless or there's actually a bunch of gateways that offer a bunch of cool stuff. Uh, we are going to implement those features and make those available, uh, regardless of uh, those features are actually available for other payment gateways as well. So yeah, this is something that's pretty easy to do with Stripe. Create new invoice items to a subscription or create new subscriptions. It's not as easy to do with PayPal, so we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, the idea is that the entire process is going to be as smooth as possible for the end customer. Yeah, Ideal is coming as well. Mm, okay, so Rafaeli is asking if you plan a new UI for the enrollment wizard. Yes, and not only that, but we are also going to offer you the building blocks to create your own wizard on the front end. So right now we have a uh, registration slash checkout process that it's pretty set in stone. There's not a lot of uh, things that you can change, customize to make it look the way you want to. So we are going to keep the default sign up and flow, but we want to give you the option to customize that part of the your WAS experience as much as possible. So what we're going to do is that we're going to expose a couple of shortcodes and Gutenberg blocks to allow you to create your your ideal sign up flow and your ideal checkout flow. Yeah. Yeah. So, guys, I think I'm going to end the webinar now. uh, we've been talking for a little over uh, an hour and 15 minutes, actually. I appreciate you guys uh, taking the time. Uh, I'll post in the group the video when the recording is done. Uh, but yeah, thank you for being here. I'm not sure if we are going to have another one of those before the holidays. So happy holidays to you all. Uh, and yeah, I think that 2020 is going to be a good year for the WAS community in general and for WP Ultimo in particular. So yeah, thanks for joining me in this journey. Thank you, guys. Okay. Bye.